Western Arts Alliance stands in solidarity with Indigenous peoples and is based respectfully in the now occupied territories of the bands of Chinook, Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tualatin and Kalapuya, Molalla, and other tribes known today as Portland, Oregon. The land upon which Portland was built at the confluence of the Columbia and Willamette rivers has served for millennia as a gathering and a trading place connecting resources from the mountains to the Pacific Ocean. Wherever you are calling from, we invite you to join us in honoring the ancestors who for millennia have been caretakers of the lands and resources upon which we live today. And we ask you to share in our commitment to preserve them on behalf of generations to come. Welcome to the next stage, Essential Issues in Performing Arts Creation, Presentation, Engagement. Episode 1, Creation in Isolation. Adversity meets innovation. The next stage is produced by Western Arts Alliance in partnership with the Taiwan Academy in Los Angeles. Throughout this series, we'll gather innovative artists and arts leaders in the United States, Taiwan, and beyond to explore the most significant challenges and opportunities of this global crisis. Each episode will spotlight diverse voices, new ideas, groundbreaking innovations to help the performing arts navigate the pandemic and thrive. May 26th, Extending Our Reach, explores performance in a digital age. And June 16th, Rethinking Residencies will dig into new strategies and approaches to reimagine and re-energize residencies as a model for community-centered presenting. We are so grateful to the Next Stage sponsors, the Taiwan Academy in Los Angeles and the Taiwan Ministry of Culture. I want to especially thank Yang Ting Chen, Director, and Sophie Chen, Cultural Officer at the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Los Angeles. We couldn't have undertaken this project without your support, so thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge and thank today's interpreters, Dr. Lin Yating, Associate Professor of Dance Studies at Taipei National University of the Arts School of Dance, and Su Yan Yan, an American Translator Association certified interpreter based in Toronto. Thank you, Dr. Lin and Ms. Su. Please join us following the panel for a live Q&A with the speakers. We encourage you to write down any questions you might have during the panel and share those with us as we open the Q&A. Moderating today's panel is Chris Lorway, Executive Director of Stanford Live and Bing Concert Hall. Chris has had a long and distinguished career in the performing arts, so here's just a few highlights. Before joining Stanford in 2016, Chris was Executive Director, Programming and Marketing for Massey Hall and Roy Thompson Hall, home of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra and the Toronto International Film Festival, where he curated and presented an annual season of approximately 150 performances. Prior to that, he was Executive Director of Soundstreams, a Toronto-based music presenter that commissions, develops, and showcases the work of contemporary composers. Welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you very much for having me. Another shout out to Sophie, who's been a great supporter of work and connecting North Americans to her colleagues in Taiwan, and I'm thrilled to be here today speaking with one of them. I had a chance to see Cloudgate 2 in Shanghai when I was over to see actually another one of our guests' performance at the festival in October. I guess it was almost 2 years ago. So all these nice confluences coming together today with our guests. In addition, we have Aditya, a Carnatic singer who is based in LA and intertwines the traditions of that rich vocal tradition with contemporary influences that he finds himself being exposed to on a daily basis in Los Angeles, hip hop, jazz, and other things. So it's a really nice mix of people that I'm thrilled to both introduce some of you to, but also hopefully through the course of this conversation, you'll get to know a bit better. The idea of this panel is this notion of creation and isolation, which I think is something that we're all, I would say some people are embracing and others are struggling with. I think that the trauma of the past year, this global pandemic that has affected all of us, is something that as artists has been a moment where we've seen a lot of our livings cut off. And I think that whole period of reset has made those artists who are able to use that time to think creatively, to excel and develop and create new work. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that it could be a very difficult time for other artists who just don't have the energy to be able to do that sort of work. So the ideas that we're exploring today look at potentially both sides of that issue when you're put in a situation where you have to isolate and really think about how that period of isolation impacts you as an artist. Is it a period of reflection and retreat, or is it a period of actual creation and development of work? And I'll be interested to hear from our panelists how it's been for them. I'll like to start with a general question to all three panelists, which is just tell us a little bit about the context of the past year and what either you as an individual or your company has been doing. Maybe I'll start with Farooq.
Hello, everyone. No, I think "you're on mute" was the quote of 2020, and now is the quote of 2021. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. Yeah. Gosh, the last 12, 14 months, it's been crisis management for Akram company, trying to figure out how to survive and stay alive and keep everyone, motivated and optimistic and forward thinking after many years of working hard to be where we were at the beginning of the pandemic. And in addition to that, personally, I've also been working on other projects with a new company called China House Arts, which is developing works there and programs. And that's been a building process. And in many ways, the pandemic has supported that, because when you're building, you don't need a lot of noise around you, because building is noisy itself in itself. And obviously on a personal front, it's been challenging, trying to keep, as a producer, a creative producer, I thrive on optimism and hope. And I guess many of us do. And it's been very difficult at times, being lost in those dark holes of the despair of the pandemic and finding the energy and resilience to drag myself out of it. So it's been a great year and a year of huge challenges and a year of lots of dark holes.
Thanks. Tsung-lung, I know that for you and your company, there's probably a few nuances that are slightly different. One being that Taiwan has been so successful in mitigating the number of cases. So I know that there still has been at least moments where you've been able to do either domestic performances or even some domestic touring. But it was also a very interesting year for you in that it was supposed to be this international tour that was a bit of a handoff year. As Mr. Lin was retiring and you were taking over as the new artistic head of Cloudgate. Could you talk briefly about your past year and how those two things have influenced both the way you've been thinking about the company and also any work that's come out of that period?
去年1到3月我们在法国和
Last year, between January to March, we were still touring in Europe. The pandemic was not so serious yet in Europe at that time, so we were very lucky to have succeeded that tour. But once we returned back to Taiwan, the pandemic had also spread in Taiwan. But of course, this meant that we had more time in the rehearsal studio working with our dancers. And so although this is a very bad situation for the whole world, but for our company, it actually gave us more precious time to concentrate on our rehearsals, working together in the studio, a very fortunate event for us. Luckily, in Taiwan, the pandemic is well controlled. Therefore, we were able to travel around Taiwan and learn about the island in terms of its natural environments. We went hiking in the mountains in search of some inspiration and ways of moving the body in high altitudes. We also did a lot of outreach events. For example, last year, to enable the performances to take place, every audience had to put on face mask and had to leave their names and contact numbers on the ticket stubs in case we need to get in touch with them. So although it was a bad situation for the whole world, but personally for us and our company members, it meant a precious time for us to transition, especially as it was my first year as the artistic director. So this gave me more positive energy.
Thank you. And Aditya, how about you? How's life been in Los Angeles? I know it's been a real hotspot during the pandemic here in the US and been challenging for so many people there. I'd love to sort of hear what your time has been like.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a huge shift in my creative process. But even like, I'll give you a backstory. Even going into the end of 2019, 2020 was supposed to be a big year in my head. I had just signed a record deal for my album, which was supposed to release on March 20th, which was like actually the start of the lockdown.
Mhm.
And I signed with 3 agents. The first time I've ever signed with an agent. I've always booked myself. At the end of 2019 at WA is where all that happened. And yeah, I had a tour planned for the album. I was on tour with Akram company in Xenos. And I was so excited to be going to countries that I've never been to, like South Korea and parts of Mexico that I've never been to. And there's a lot of exciting new things that were on my plate for 2020. So naturally, when the lockdown happened and things got canceled, there was a bit of a huge letdown, and I felt a bit of sadness and regret for all that happening. But over the course of the year, it's actually been a strange blessing. Yeah, I guess I've learned more about myself. It's like you said, you can either go into a mode of reflection, and I think that's what's kind of happened for me, luckily. And yeah, so that's where I'm at right now.
Well, you brought up that notion of international touring and Farooq. There's that great series on Netflix that Akram is included in, Move, and it documents that moment where he was doing that big event in Bangladesh, and all of a sudden it was right at the edge of the pandemic when everything stopped. And I know probably for Cloudgate as well too, it's been a period where that spigot basically turned off for international touring. And can you talk about the importance of that type of business for your organizations and the impact that cutoff of international touring has had on the companies?
I mean, for Akram Khan Company, international touring is our bread and butter. It makes up 72% of our revenue. And I think on the last count, we lost about 303 performances, which is a hell of a lot in a year, and over £1 million in gross revenue, which is important to the company's survival and allows us to develop new ideas and keep the company in good morale, and and for us, our work to be enjoyed around the world by others. So it was obviously very devastating, and many touring companies who are similar would have felt the same. But as Aditya said, I think the moment to reflect and to stop was almost a blessing, because touring's like a treadmill. You go and you go and you go and you get out there and you want to share what you have with the rest of the world, but you forget about, it's easy to lose sight of who you are and what you stand for, even though the work in many ways represents that. So I think the early part of the lockdown was an opportunity to look at our values again as an organization. And I think what you saw in that Move documentary, the struggle it is just to bring this together, but also what really resonated with me was how those powerful values, the values that we hold as a company, came through. And I think that's what we focused a lot on all our online projects, particularly in the first 6 months, was rather than just transmit work as we made it onto the screen, we thought it'd be a great opportunity to self-reflect and share that on the screen. Talk about what we stand for, what are our values, what matters to us, what were we prepared to fight for, and what have we learned about who we are. So I think in many ways, we may have lost all that touring, and that was being difficult and painful, and we will have to rebuild ourselves of the ashes of that devastation. In some ways, we've recalibrated our sense of identity, and that recalibration, I think, is going to stand us in good stead as we move forward when the pandemic ends.
Tsung-lung, similar question to you. I know you had a big North American tour planned. We were looking forward to hosting you in California, and just wondering again what sort of impact the loss of international touring has on a company like Cloudgate.
有许多的北美的国际巡演都延期
A
到。
lot of our North American tours have been postponed, unfortunately, till next year. Of course, this impacted our revenue, and this pandemic have definitely influenced us greatly. We have tried to kind of cut back and cut down. So in terms of salary, there's been a cut in between 5 to 20%. And myself and our dancers and even our administrators, we also question ourselves and rethink what is important to us, what do we like, and learn new things during this period. For example, with the new technologies, we've been looking into AR, VR, ways of perhaps new ways of documenting or presenting dance to audiences. And also this precious moment for me and our dancers to think back of what is the unique way of moving for Cloudgate over the past 4 decades, which has been based on our own cultural foundation, but perhaps with a new way of presenting for our audience. So this is a time for us to rethink what we really, what is really meaningful for us.
Aditya, there's both the other two panelists referred to that notion of the move to digital in some way and exploring that. Is that something that was part of your, it seems like I've been on your SoundCloud and your YouTube channel, so you seem to be very prolific in generating that sort of content regularly, but I'm just curious how your approach may have shifted or changed during the pandemic.
I actually didn't think of myself as, when I think of myself, I don't think of adapting to this technological change during lockdown. In the beginning of it, I was very excited to explore possibilities about collaborating with musicians in different countries and virtually. There's obviously a lot of technical issues with that, but my frustrations with that kind of mounted, and I went the other direction. And I did do a few of the virtual streaming performances with my band and solo, and it was nice in a sense because I got to stay in touch with the feeling of performing, but at the same time it didn't quite do it for me, and then it grew old pretty fast for me and I just got frustrated. So I went the other way, where I just kind of went deep within my own voice, I kind of was forced to go back to my roots, what I can do by myself, and not rely on that interaction, which has been such a huge part of my growth. And yeah, so creatively I've really grown a lot, and like Farooq said, I had a chance to recalibrate my vision. Performatively, I mean, performances are also my bread and butter. I'm not a teacher, I'm not in academics, I'm a performer. And so on that front I've struggled, but I'm just happy to recalibrate my goals as an artist, and I'm excited to move forward.
Thank you. The idea of this notion of forward momentum, I think as we look at these different possibilities, whether it's through digital technology or through other means, I'm kind of curious, were there any things that were experiments that were total failures that you tried during this time? Or did you feel that medium, at least as a band-aid to this period, served you well? And I'll just open that up to anybody to respond to.
That's good question, Chris. Good question. I thought part of the creative process is failing often anyway. I mean, I think that's inbuilt, whether it's digital or it's the live space. And and the thing is, you're trying to find something that's personal and meaningful, and find a way to to share that and connect that with the audience. I think it's been, gosh, this, I realized what you miss through the digital experience, and I realized how much more work it requires to find a way to really connect in a meaningful way with the audience, you know. And because I was very conscious of the fact over the year that, you know, when you're in the physical space, you're also there when you're presenting work to the, you know, to the audience. The audience are also there for each other. There's this kind of ritualistic experience which sometimes was missing from the digital experience. So the question, what we at AKC tried, and I think we did to varying degrees of success, how do you create that sense of ritual? And maybe we got it close, and maybe we didn't get quite far enough, and maybe we needed to step back, but it was so new to us. And it was almost like we're playing with a whole new set of tools here, and kind of figure, if I put that here and I put that there. And also the fact is that, you know, a lot of artists, they benefit from not knowing the technical capabilities of putting a show on. So they may say to their their technical manager, you know, I'd love to have a moon the size of 10 meters wide, and, you know, and they don't know how that's done. And that's part of the magic of it, you know, and then someone has to solve the problem. But in the digital space, you realize the people who are creating are also the technicians. And so you're very conscious then of the practical, the practicalities that you already start thinking of before you start something. And that may inhibit your ability to dream and expand your creativity and imagination even further. So I think we dipped our toes in the water of it, and I think we did some things really well. I feel it works well when it's shorter. That's clear. I think I'd love to explore if we can take it into a more ritualistic type of engagement. Maybe you just do it once, and like you go to the theatre, you don't, you know, think, well, I'm back home from the pub now, I'll put my feet up and I'll stick on Akram Khan's Move, but I'll pause it when I need to go and make myself a coffee. You know, and in a way that, you know, for the audience, as one who experiences an audience member, I found that somehow diluted the experience. So I think that's where you know, I'm thinking it isn't not necessarily a failure, but how do we look for that deeper spiritual connection between observer and creator?
Any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I've been very resistant to getting into the digital space, but I guess the farthest I've dipped my toes in it is thanks to my agent, Cindy Huang, with Impulse Creative. She started a Twitch series. Twitch is a platform. It's a great platform, but it's something that was very different for me, and it was more interactive. And I did more academic sessions, and I'm not much into the academic side of music. I'm more into the performative side. So it got me to like kind of deconstruct what I'm doing, my improvisations, and kind of explain it in a way that would connect with people from who have never heard this style and come from different backgrounds. So it challenged me in that way. And yeah, I was excited about doing my first live performance gig. Like, it wasn't live with an audience, but it was a taped performance. I was very excited before it because I got to meet with my band again after a long time, and it was on a stage with lights and sound. So everything leading up to it felt like a live performance, and it was for Skirball Center, and it was going to be televised. So like, as we were waiting in the dressing room to come on stage, everything about it, like after our sound check, everything about it felt like a live performance. So I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. This is it. Like, okay, we're not doing live performances, but this is pretty close. And then as soon as I got on stage and I just saw an empty hall and like two guys with a video camera, I just like, my energy zapped, and I just realized how I took that audience for granted. It just, yeah, like it is a ritual experience. It's so shared, and when that's missing, it feels like a fraction of what it is. And as grateful as I was for that opportunity to still perform and make money from performing, it didn't do it for me. And that's what kind of, after that, I just wasn't as into pursuing it, and I wish I was, but I went the other way where I took it as a time to like become a hermit and just create in my back studio here and just write stuff on my own. Yeah.
There's a great article, I don't know if you saw it, that just came out in the Atlantic the other day by Will Butler from Arcade Fire. And he talks about the whole notion of that ritual and the danger in that ritual, in that you never really know what you might do as an artist, and you never really know how the audience might respond. And he was actually saying that he was concerned about returning to that space if there was all of a sudden all these protocols that made the space less dangerous, because he felt that the energy was actually derived from the danger. So it was kind of an interesting framing of that idea as well too.
Oh, I love that, Chris. Sorry, just
yeah.
to respond to that. I think what listening to Aditya and what you just said, I think that element of risk and danger is what makes live performance so utterly compelling. And, you know, it can go wrong at any moment, but it could also create absolute moments of magic, just almost accidentally, you know, and that really being the sense of being present, you know, in you know, with the sense of risk, with the sense of danger, but with the sense of probably something transcendental as the reward of that, taking that risk, is something which really makes the live performance extremely, you know, meaningful for us as people.
Yeah, I think that accidental magic is what was missing. That is the beauty.
And Tsung-lung, I guess you're probably the only person in this space who over the past year has actually had that interaction with audience. And do you feel any of that with the protocols that are in place now, with the audience wearing masks? Has that changed the way in which your artists on stage even feel they're interacting with an audience? Is the audience different in that context?
他在问我吗？我想回答上面那一题。
Okay, actually, let me share something in response to the previous question. We had many friends in music and in theater, but this year I've gotten to know new friends in photography and technology and augmented reality and virtual reality. These are new friends that I have made during this year, and this is very interesting for me. As if I've discovered a new way of seeing, of understanding our world, a new media for me. So in terms of space, there's a new understanding for me in terms of choreography. Of course, it's very important to have this live performance experience, even with the mask on for the audiences in Taiwan, in a pretty safe environment. It hasn't been that much of a difference for us actually here in Taiwan, but we could still, for example, see their smiles behind the mask.
Let's get into the actual question around work, and I'm kind of curious to hear from each of you as you've looked at the last year. What are some of the projects specifically that you've been working on that you're excited to share with audiences as we emerge from this the pandemic?
I'm going in order here. I should.
That's fine.
But no, I mean, look, the projects that have been really fantastic. Again, at Akram Company was, you know, when the pandemic first hit, the first reaction was, let's get work out online. You know, the previous back catalogue, the repertoire. But then we stopped in our tracks and thought, would that be enough? Should we not stop and think about what this means to us? And so then we developed a very beautiful program called Architects of Stillness. And what that was made up, it was made up of various teaching online by Maven Koo from the company. Akram was telling stories to his daughter. I made a podcast every Sunday evening telling his daughter stories from the Mahabharata. And I wrote down these stories through my life, which I call stories of hope, about various incidents that shaped me as a producer and just as a human being. And we shared those initially. And that not only did that it was great to connect with the audience, it was really great for the energy of the organization, the company. It brought us together. So that was fantastic. And then in the summer, we did this program that was planned pre-demic called Animal Kingdom. We invited lots of dancers all around the world to learn a little phrase and create their own animal. And that was put together in a very touching film, about 9 minutes long, with dancers from, like I said, from all around the world, into something that where people could, it was all about getting the physical body back into the outside space. So that was, and then the final thing that was really big in our year was what we called the Silent Burn Project. So that was a celebration of the 20 years of the company. And Aditya was involved, and many wonderful people were involved. And we used it not as an opportunity just to present work that we've done before, but to reflect on work, reflect on process, and actually, wrestle with some of those real thorny issues of, like diversity and representation. We had a panel discussion about this. Talks about spirituality and what does it mean to, what does God mean for people? And also reflect on the history of the journey. Akram and I had an interview talking about how we got to where we got, and all our failures and mistakes, and our moments of naivety and immaturity and fearlessness. And in a way that was a 3-hour film, and that was spread out over a period of time. But what was really wonderful about that, it was ability to kind of reflect on our values, who we are, because work is the end game. You don't start with the work, you end with the work. And it's because we believe in certain things that then propels us and drives us to make these creations. So I thought that was great. And the rest of the time was just crisis financial management, about how much we're going to survive without touring and stuff like that. But we were able just to finally, we started to think about, what does touring mean in the future, because there was the whole issue of climate change, and we started to address that. As a touring company who have terrible carbon footprints, what do we do? How do we rethink that touring model for the future? So it was a great time to reflect on that. And we're bashing around a few ideas right now for our next project, about first, obviously, reducing scenic, reliance on big scenic elements, trying to make things more, low tech in a way, maybe to use animation, which we are going to use, in fact. So it's allowed us to also think about the future of touring and the future of the work in relationship to our responsibilities as global citizens, to climate, to representation, as well as to art.
Tsung-lung, do you want to tell us a little bit about what CloudGate has been working on over the past year?
我们每年都会，因为每年都会有一个户外的。
Every year for CloudGate, there is a outdoor performance, and the audience actually reaches about 50 to 60 million, and it's a free performance, so it's really a mass event. Last year, because of the pandemic, we were unable to have this annual free outdoor performance, so we did it online. We moved my piece called Lunar Halo online, and this is actually a work from 2019, and it is based on nature, my observations of nature, and how humans have been affected by technological advancement. And through technology, maybe nature has been damaged. This year, we will still plan to have this outdoor performance, but because we had more time to travel outdoors with our dancers last year, and because I myself am an avid, I hike a lot. Therefore, I try to lead our dancers and share with them my passion or my hobby with moving outdoors. For example, stepping on the slopes and feeling the different ways of gravity and how it may change our way of dancing. So last year, I premiered a piece called Sounding Light. And all the sound elements were actually made by the dancers, either through their mouths imitating nature, sounds from nature, birds, or the wind, or the bamboo sounds, or insect sounds. And I myself moved into the mountains last year during this pandemic era. So I wanted to try to capture this kind of natural surrounding or natural landscape and move it into the indoor stages so that we can try to reconnect further with nature. We in Taiwan are fortunate because of the good control of the pandemic by our government and our people. So we have traveled to quite remote towns and villages and shared our dance events. We continue this kind of outreach to the grassroots communities, and so that the communities there where they may not have these large sophisticated theaters, but we can have closer hand-to-hand, very intimate ways of connecting with these Taiwanese communities. We introduce ballet, we introduce various ways of dance to them so that they have an opportunity to truly experience dance for themselves.
Well, next time you're in California, we'll have to go for a hike in the redwoods. So look forward to that.
I look forward to that very much.
Aditya, I noticed Aditya on your SoundCloud, the latest track that you put up was quite a simple vocal track with a guitar backing. It looked like that was the first thing off a new project that was coming out. And I know a lot of your earlier stuff has been quite orchestrated with lots of different collaborators. And I'm kind of curious about, has this period been one in which you've decided to sort of step back and strip things down, or is that just a rare moment of reflection on the particular track?
No, that's exactly what's happened. I mean, I'll go back. Interaction, since the beginning, interaction has been a huge part of my journey. Like even in the Carnatic music training from a kid, it's not an art form you kind of learn by watching YouTube videos or taking Zoom classes. You have to be in person with your guru. And that's where you imbibe so much from watching your guru, from having them be there with you. My performance career started off with at 15 when I started touring with Ravi Shankar, and being around him and his ensemble. And I learned so much from his compositions and the way, the things that his musicians would tell me, or little tips they would give me. I wouldn't have gotten that if I wasn't interacting. And most recently with Akram Khan, he's been such a huge inspiration. And the current album I'm working on, and the song that you're talking about isn't a part of that album, but it's along that aesthetic. And Akram Khan is mentoring me on this project. And it's really getting me to kind of strip down a bit. Like my stuff with my ensemble is very orchestrated, as you mentioned. It's a lot of it is I'll come with the seed of an idea and I'll meet with my guys. We've known each other since college, so it was always a dialogue. It was friends meeting to practice, jam, and build songs together, build compositions together. So I wouldn't really fully flesh out stuff. I would come with an idea and I would go to them and we'd flesh it out together. For instance, if I had a percussion idea, I would just have an idea of how I want the rhythm to sound, and I'd go to my percussionist and he'd interpret it in his own way. But now I don't have that interaction. So I've actually picked up a percussion instrument that my first instrument that I ever learned when I was about 6 was the mridangam. It's a South Indian percussion. I have it right here. It's this instrument. And I haven't touched it in about a decade. So I started picking that up again. And I would flesh out my ideas on that instrument. I would record it just to get an idea, because I don't have that rehearsal time with my musicians. And I ended up starting to like that sound. And I started getting confidence in my own playing again. So I started picking up that instrument, and and that's the traditional Carnatic sound, which for some reason I wasn't using in my contemporary work. I was using drums, I was using Latin percussion. But now I'm going back to my roots kind of, and finding more of my own sound that I grew up with. And I still, I mean, Carnatic music is my heart and soul. But in my contemporary work, I was obviously influenced by my friends who are jazz musicians, and the ensemble is primarily jazz. but yeah, I've not had that interaction, so I'm going back to myself. I'm going back to my roots, and I'm working with less, and I'm finding out different ways to use my voice too. So when before it could be just singing a song and worrying about the arrangement and the orchestration, I don't have those elements. I don't have those external elements. I just have myself. So just singing the song isn't enough now. How do I change the way I use my voice? Can grunting become singing? Can shouting become singing? Can screeching become singing? Can I make music out of these things that naturally that my voice has? And it's really gotten me to go deeper. And yeah, the album I've been working over this past lockdown, the working title right now is called Lockdown and Loaded. It's just basically about the tension that this whole year has been, the uncertainty and the tension, and also the beauty of going back into my roots and kind of retreating. And I've gotten deeper in my Carnatic singing as well. So it's been a blessing in disguise.
All three of you have described this sort of sense of going, back both into the mind and to the body to some extent. So it sounds like, that's been a great moment of reflection and learning. And I guess my final question to each of you is around just that. As you reflect on the past year, what are the things that you thought had been essential learnings that you will take forward in your practice? And Farooq, you already alluded to the notion of touring and that sort of impact on climate. But what are some of the other learnings that you feel you've had as a company that you will carry forward?
I think it goes back to what Aditya just said, is that you can say so much more by saying less. I mean, if you go back to the original impulses and intentions of the creative process or Akram's vision, it's very pure. I mean, over the years we've become, I don't want to use the word commercialized, but it's an industry we're working in, and we make these shows and we get them out there and we connect with, and we're in this, in show business, let's say, for want of a better expression. And so I think one of the learnings of realizing you can actually trust yourself to say as much or even more by using less. And I think that understanding and the courage to believe in that, and the confidence to start believing in that, investing in that feeling, because to start something, you first have to believe you can do it, right? And have the courage to go with it. So I think that's it really. It's about, I'm looking forward to what comes out of this, because also the resistance is also important for creative energy. The fact is, you can't do something creates, a kind of emotional, intellectual, psychological tension that then somehow is going to come out. So what the hell that's going to be, I don't know, but I'm really looking forward to it.
And Tsung-lung, as you have just taken over the artistic direction of the company, how was the past year really pushing your thinking forward about what the future of the company can be?
很巧，林就是我的老师，也就是云门的前的艺术总监林怀民老师，他也跟我说，少即是多。
Very coincidentally, Mr. Lin Huaimin, my mentor and the previous artistic director of Cloudgate, also told me less is more. Less is more. So I've been thinking about this a lot and how it actually can be accomplished through my own life and in my choreographic artistic practice. Previously, most of our dancers have been very well trained in their techniques, but now I would like them to explore more in terms of their bodily experience. For example, expand their lifestyles, expand their life experiences in different surroundings, different emotions, and more ways of experiencing life. And therefore, I've been trying to provide such opportunities for our dancers. And hopefully this can ignite or inspire them to think why they really like to dance. So because I've been thinking about my creations, So I've been contemplating of how this new group of our new dancers can have a faith or have a trust in this group ensemble. And we are each just a drop of water that we can hopefully stream together into a pond or an ocean, and each contribute their own individual experience, and to have this kind of rich experience, bodily experience, to input into our choreographic projects. So this way, hopefully we can become one spiritually as well.
And Aditya, I'll throw the final word to you. Again, this is, as you mentioned, been quite the year, and what will you take away from it that will that you'll value going forward?
Less is more. That's what I'm gonna take away.
Yeah.
And just stripping down. And another thing is I want to embrace the audience. I really miss the audience, and I think sometimes in the past, if it's a big performance, I will kind of try and I want to go in, so I kind of shut out the audience. Sometimes I make it a point to like pretend they're not there. But now I wonder, I want to feel that energy. So I wonder how that would change. So I want to embrace that a bit more.
Yeah.
Chris, can I just add to what Aditya said? I know you had the final question, and
Yeah.
I want to take the final word, but it was something that was really, as both my friends were speaking earlier, it made me think that one thing that I realized, the speed of life, there's a speed to life, there's a rhythm, and I realized for so long we were moving at the speed of, reputation, moving at the speed of money, moving at the speed of fame, and whatever you want to call it. But one thing I realized, there are different speeds that we've been missing, and that's the speed of trust. That's the speed of love. That's the speed of hope. And that's a very different rhythm. And to reconnect with those rhythms of life and speed, I'm hoping that when we come out of it with the less is more approach, that will also adjust the rhythm of our existence to those more internal values.
I think that's a lovely way to cap off. And I want to thank the three of you for being so generous in your sharing today. It's been great, I think, for everybody here in the WA audience to get to know each of you a little bit better. And I share that similar hope that you do, Farooq, that we'll be able to emerge from this in a really reflective way, and that we not only take care of our artists, but also take care of ourselves as we enter whatever the new normal is. But thank you, and look forward to a vibrant question and answer period. So over to Tim.
Great. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Director Cheng, Farooq, Chaudhry, Aditya, Prakash. It's been a great conversation. Thanks too to Dr. Lin Yatin and Ms. Su Yang for their diligent translation of this conversation. And then finally, of course, thank you to the Taiwan Academy in Los Angeles and the Taiwan Ministry of Culture. Please join us for the Q&A.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Q&A. We were trying to create this sense of illusion that we are just picking up from where we left off in the conversation, and some of the panelists are very diligent about wearing the same clothes, but I will break the myth, given that I'm in a different setting wearing a different shirt, and hope that we will actually be revitalized, other than Farooq, who is now up at some ungodly hour in the morning. But thanks for being here, Farooq, and now is your opportunity to come in with some questions for the panelists, and I'll get us started off with a couple that have already come through. And one of them was specifically around the idea of what parts of things that you learned during the pandemic or developed during the pandemic will you continue when we're back to quote unquote normal?
Doing financial management in a more calm kind of way. I think that was something with the pandemic. Zoom calls we'll be doing more of probably in the future. I think better listening, Chris, I guess, and also I think also the fact is the knowledge that, life without art and culture is so much less colorful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us talked about this notion of being in a bit of a rat race and just constantly in motion. And do you think that you're going to find yourself slowing down a little bit? Aditya, do you have any sort of sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the first question, I do think I will question my choices more. I think Farooq talked about being on the treadmill. I felt like before it was about creating content. You need to keep producing stuff. And yes, I had my band. We would arrange music. We would put it out. But now I'm since I've gone back into my roots and I'm using my own voice, using my own percussion, using less elements. Can I say the same thing with less? And I think that will, even though I might be able to work with my band again, maybe I don't need a full 7-piece band for a particular song that can be said with just voice. So questioning those choices is something I'll take forward.
Thank you. Tsung-lung, how about you? Any thoughts on this?
我觉得具体来说，不知道是不是有没有办法学习，因为其实在这个很大的变化之下，有非常多的时间在忙碌于应付各种的状况，例如许多的演出的取消，例如防疫的各种措施上面。那还有一个原因，也是因为或许这是第一二年我才开始这一个新的职务。
Okay, so actually, I'm not sure if I can propose this correctly, but because there's been such a dramatic change in this year, and I have just taken on this artistic director leadership for over a year now. And there's been so much to catch up with during this change in this epidemic period, so that I'm still trying to handle things one at a time.
然后我觉得比较明显的一个状态是去查验直觉，就是当生活在过去有一个非常长时间的安定，或者是不断持续在反应的一个过程里面，在这一两年的状况里面，这个直觉好像跟现实的生活会有一些抵触跟落差，所以我觉得这2年最棒，我觉得如果说要学习的话，最棒的是去重新去查验这个直觉，是不是这个直觉是不是有办法去反映当下的生活的状态。
Okay, and the most important awareness for me during this period is that to pay more attention to our own instincts, because after this long period of more silence and calm, and we've been able to hear more of our own instincts. I hope this kind of awareness can be maintained in the future after this period.
Thank you. One of the questions relates to, in particular, our 2 international panelists, and given that we're largely a cohort of American presenters, largely based on the West Coast, I'm curious about what sort of work you're hoping to bring to this part of the world in the near future. And maybe we can start with you, Farooq.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're currently working on a reimagining of the Jungle Book, you know, right now. So we have discussed that, and we will be bringing it to the US, I think, in 2023. And in many ways, it kind of carries within it many of the themes that have been kind of going through lockdown or pre-lockdown, like, you know, like this issue of, I know you carry, you know, you've got the story of Mowgli, which, but in our version, it also looks at the issue of representation. It looks at the issue of climate change. And so, yeah, those are kind of born out of the experience of the lockdown, and you know, we're using, in typical Akram style, it's been turned on its head and brought into the modern era. So yeah, we hope to be bringing that to you guys in 23.
And hopefully we'll have the long-awaited Rite of Spring here as well too, in next year.
With the Yang Li Ping, of course, yeah, next January. I forgot about that. You know, I'm in a funny way. 2022 has already been lived in my head, so I forgot we still got to live that. But yeah, and there's also Akram I think he's bringing Xenos, but I think it's on the East Coast next year, okay, or later this year. Sorry,
it's in Chicago and DC this year.
Awesome. Tsung-lung, I know you were planning to bring the company over last year, and now there are new dates. Can you tell us what program you'll be bringing over, and which cities you're hoping to visit in the U.S.?
讲一次，不好意思。我们会带一个作品是叫做13声，它是从我童年的一个，它在台北的一个老城区所发展出来的一个作品。
I will be bringing my work called 13 Tongues to the US. It is based on my memories from the older part of Taipei, and it has a lot of the kind of older Taiwanese settings in it.
Right.
And then
然后这个作品我们会带到芝加哥、甘乃迪中心，还有伯克莱跟斯坦福这几个城市，然后也希望可以去更多地方跳这个作品，因为这个作品它有很丰富的色彩，然后它是一个在台湾在台北的一个非常特别的，我们把视角转向的那一些底层生活的人的样态。那它就是一个我童年的一种生长的状态，我很希望可以让这些不被看见的、甚至是不被正视的东西，它可以在一个作品里面被看见。
We will be touring to the Chicago Auditorium as well as the Kennedy Center and as well in Berkeley and Stanford, of course. And because this piece is very lively, a very colorful piece based on a lot of my observations of the city dwellers in the older part of Taipei, which have often gone unnoticed, perhaps due to their lower status or their works or profession. So I hope to be able to share this part of my observation of the Taiwanese culture with you all.
Thank you. Aditya, I know a lot of people in the music industry in particular have been just sort of awaiting that moment where they can start things up again. And I'm kind of curious, I see Bill sort of lurking over there in our attendees area. And as that whole motion started in terms of, are you starting to see gigs reappear again? And how soon is that, and where will you be going?
Yeah, the good news happened this week. I got my first live performance at the Segerstrom Center in Costa Mesa on July 17th. And yeah, things are slowly starting to open up, and 2022 spring is when like out of state shows have lined up. But and of course Akram Khan's Xenos, I'll be touring with that in the fall in the US. So yeah, life is starting to kind of show signs of opening up again, and it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, we're starting to see that as well too. We actually open here our cinema series tonight, so there is light at the end of the tunnel. An interesting question here, and this is sort of for Tsung-lung, but I guess it's a more universal question. There are parts of the world that, like Taiwan, that have seen less deaths as a result of COVID in the way that things have been managed. And as we look at the other examples in the world, whether it's the US, Brazil, now we're seeing horrific things happening in India. Do you think that in some ways artists' emotional response to the tragedy of the pandemic will be different depending on the community in which you were working in or the experience that you have?
我觉得如果在这样的情况之下，我们只能等待。我觉得如果是一个创作者来讲，我们只能等待，甚至我们只能祈祷。例如像这几天印度的状态，让人家非常的担心。我们从新闻里面看到许多哀愁的脸、悲伤的故事，所以。但是我认为这是一个累积能量的一个过程。我们看到这样的故事，体验到这样的事情，它可不可能变成一个让我们记住的事情？
Yes, indeed. It's been a very sad scenario. I see from the news the very worrisome situation right now in India, for example, and I see the very sad faces through the news. But I think at this kind of a period, maybe perhaps the best thing is to hold on and to wait and maybe keep these images in mind so that perhaps in the later near future, these kind of powerful images could evolve into some kind of an energy for artistic creation.
Any other thoughts on that from either of the other panelists?
Yeah, Chris, it reminds us not to get smug. I mean, a few of us are ahead of the game, and there's a lot of people in the world who are really suffering, as we can see quite clearly from those very tragic images we're getting from India. But also that we're not alone yet. We can't. Sorting out our problem at home isn't going to sort out the world's problems. We've got to work more collectively and support each other in this. And I think, I think in many ways artists subconsciously try to, from a very personal standpoint, seek to kind of project or express a universal sense of belonging or universal questions. So it does throw that up, and I imagine that will affect what comes out, but not consciously. I suspect it will be an unconscious and subconscious reaction to this sense of being a fractured world, a world that's in despair. So yeah, we'll see, but it will take time, I think, before that fact plays itself through into the works of art that are made over the coming years.
Yeah, and interestingly, suffering or moments of pain and adversity is really fodder for artists, and we are this pandemic it's forever going to be with us. It's going to be, I mean, my album that I'm working on now is my reactions to what's happening over this year. It's really shook me up, and I think a lot of the art that we're going to see will be heavily influenced by this period that we're going through.
Related to that, and Farooq, maybe I'll throw this back to you, is that there was a question in the chat about how the pandemic and what's happening now might impact female choreographers, and given your work with Young Li Ping and some of the other women I know that you've been developing through Akram's company, I'm just wondering, is the dialogue the same, or is there nuances within the female choreographic community that's slightly different?
Oh, I haven't noticed any big change, to be honest, Chris. I mean, it's I don't want to go into gender approaches and politics, but there is, over the years, I've noticed there is a different approach to working with people through, but the goals are exactly the same, so yeah. Gosh, I don't dare say something, because I'm sure I know I'm going to sound like an idiot and make a very generalization about men and women. No, but I feel like, no, not really. I mean, but I do have something that I did think about quite strongly on Friday when I had a real moment of despair myself. I'm working on a piece, and I felt a sense of helplessness, and I almost started crying. I just was so lost. And then afterwards, I was thinking about this idea of cultural appropriation. I've taken this somewhere else, Chris. And I was speaking to a friend soon after, and I was realizing actually artists have been doing this for a very long time. We've been we culturally appropriate all the time. We're taking ideas from other people and we make them our own. I mean, I think it works really well when we do that. And that's kind of the fodder of artistic creation. And perhaps there'll be more of this coming through, because we've been so disconnected from other cultures and other people and other ways of doing stuff. I guess when it doesn't work is when we imitate other things, and it becomes a poor imitation of something else. But I think in this world of really talking about cultural appropriation, all these issues, I realize it's actually important to us. We need it.
I remember hearing Akram speak once on that very subject about the notion of the stories. There's a handful of stories that sort of originate, whether it's in mythology or through some of the great, like the Mahabharata. And so these things are somewhat universal. We all have them in our culture. And he was talking about this idea that, there's always going to be that sense of imitation until we come up and define new stories. And that's, that's his idea as being an artist was about trying to figure out the way into creating those new stories. Tsung-lung, any other thoughts on that?
我觉得在台湾的创作里面，编舞者创作的人里面，其实女性占了非常大的一部分。然后在这样的阶段里面，他们常常是几个好的朋友们聚在一起，所以好像也形成了一个力量，在台湾的各个剧场跟不同的领域里面，开始有这一些越来越多的女性的创作者开始变成一个风气，所以它是一个非常好而且值得在期待的一件事。
Yes, actually in Taiwan, a very high proportion of the choreographers are female, and they have contributed largely to the dance scene in Taiwan, obviously. And in fact, most of them are friends, and they do collaborate with each other. So together they form a very powerful female collaboration within themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Among them.
There are two other questions here. I see one is regarding, we talked earlier in the conversation about digital and streaming. And I know this is something that we have experienced as well too. Someone wanted you to comment on the complications regarding copyright and synchronization when you're getting into to taking works that would have normally been on stage and adding that additional level, taking them into the virtual world. And have any of you sort of run into that, and has that been an issue? Especially, I guess, when you're using music that still is in copyright.
Me personally, I don't know much about the issue. I generally do original work when I try to, especially when I'm doing virtual concerts that would be online because of that issue. And so I can't really comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, me as well, Chris, but I do one thing I've been very conscious of through the digital experiences that many of us have created over the last 14 months is that how badly that impacts on the freelance sector, like dancers, because you can't monetize it in the same way as you can a live performance. So these freelancers have really suffered because we can't give them the kind of money that their talents deserve to make a living, and that's been a real challenge. And so I don't know a great deal about the IP on the other elements, but I think that's all been figured out, as we enter this kind of new frontier. But I'm very conscious of the fact, unless it can monetize itself in the same way as the live performance, we run the danger of putting a whole, incredible number of freelance people out of work because they just couldn't afford to be online for like one program and be paid 1/5 of what they would normally pay to be paid on stage. Mm. And so there are dangers there. Then we have to be very wary of these, of what it could do to the practicing artists in our sector.
Thank you. I'll throw this over Tsung-lung.
我们去年7月做了一个和那个冰岛乐团 Sigur Rós 合作的一个作品，叫 Luna Halo 毛月亮，在线上演出。那非常有趣的，在推出之后，在2-3天，我们就可以在网络上看到有人把这个作品完完全全的复制下来，然后变成一个我们在网络上可以看到的一个不用收费的一个影像。
Oh, yes, I could share a bit about this issue of copyright because last year I had a collaboration piece called Lunar Halo with the music by Sigur Rós from Iceland. And actually, just after we showed it online and in 2-3 days, I saw versions of it being, spread all over the internet. And this was actually a bit worrisome for us.
其实我觉得我的感觉是很复杂，一方面我是创作其实很希望给更多人看见，可是如果因为给更多人看见而让我们的作品而让我们的付出没有办法得到一个平衡，我觉得这个也是另外一个我觉得我们会担忧的事情。
And this is really a mixed feeling for me because, of course, I would like to have more people see our work all over the world. But at the same time, if like what we were discussing earlier, the income is not being proportionately, given back to the artist, then that is something we need to work on.
Thank you. 2 final questions. This goes back, we had a conversation about how touring is going to be changing in the context of climate. And someone asked if you could talk a little bit more about that. Do you see that manifesting itself in longer engagements, residencies? I know, Farooq, you touched on trying to scale down production. Would be interested to just hear some thoughts on thinking about moving around.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the discussions that we've had has been really about when you go to a place, it's not so transactional. You don't just go in and you leave and you do the gig and you get your, but there is a deeper engagement with the external communities or the communities around the venue itself. So I think that's something that's already happening, and then responding to those contexts in which we're presenting work in terms of additional kind of, creative programs. And then there's a thing about the kind of stop taking big scenery around the world and sets, trying to do work on a back to bare minimum, with lighting, with fabrics, with animation and not big sets. And that's exactly what we're doing with Jungle Book. We're avoiding the big scenic trucks and freight, which is a big change for us. And then there's the final thing, which is something that we've really been discussing, the idea of associations with other dance companies around the world. Perhaps rather than take a work and tour it, you decide to make an association with 5 companies in Australia or US, and you decide that, say Akram will make that work and the 5 companies will share the cost of this. And then when it's finished, it will then be transferred to the company to tour territorially in that region. And so you get the benefit of reducing carbon footprint, but you also get the benefit of how work being seen in many more cities than the major capitals of that country. So there's greater distribution of that work to more people. There's less carbon, damage, and there's also more shared investment, between different dance companies. So models are being thrown around, and I think it's our responsibility to really take these on.
I think we have time for one final question, and I'll throw this as sort of a round robin where everybody can take a crack at answering this. But has the pause over the past 13 months opened up your creative impulses to new and external influences in your work in a way that's different? Maybe start with you, Aditya.
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of done the opposite. It's gotten me to go deeper in my own internal state and find all those influences that have been there that I haven't really tapped into. And another thing the pause has done is gotten my mentors to pause and have more time for me to connect with them and ask them questions. T.M. Krishna, who is a legendary Carnatic vocalist, and I learned from him. He's always touring, performing, but now he has more time. I can send him my pieces, talk about it. He deconstructs it. And same with Akram Khan is like a mentor to me. And I can send him more of my pieces and discuss it. And they're masters of going within their own art form and discovering all that they have within them. And so that has started to rub off on me, and I'm working on that sort of movement.
Tsung-lung?
没有太多时间休息。其实在这几个月里面，不断的在找更多的可能性，因为云门是一个，它有许多人在这里面一起工作，所以我们试着，我觉得在这里面，对我来讲，我得到了一个像橡皮筋拉扯的那个状态，好像在这个过程里面，觉得自己好像可以再成长一点点，我们可以再多做一点点。
Actually, there hasn't been much of a pause for us. We've been continually working in Taiwan, and especially since in Cloudgate, there are so many people to take care of in terms of dancers, our administrators, and so on and so forth. So I feel as if I've been like an elastic band. I'm trying to stretch myself further and further and to see to what extent I can make the best of this situation.
Thank you. And final word, Farooq?
Yeah, gosh, I think what Aditya said is about deeper engagement with oneself and our close colleagues. I mean, and maybe this is really a bit, it reminds me that we've got to be human beings again instead of human doings. It's like, and that's what we've been doing. We've been too busy and actually And our art thrives and our practice and our humanity thrives on us being, you know, together on our own and with each other. So yeah, I mean, you know, it would, in some curious way, it was a bit of a blessing originally to stop, you know, and to have that moment of reflection. But now I think we're eager to come back with what we've learned from this experience. God knows what that's going to play out like and what it means. But, you know, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful way to end. There was another question here about how everyone feels about being paid in cryptocurrency, but I think that's a whole other conversation for later. Thank you all so much for doing this. It's been a real pleasure, and for me, it's I know Farooq well, but and I've met Tsung-lung briefly, but I hadn't met Aditya before, so it was wonderful to meet you and get to know you and to have this conversation with you three as you navigate what has been a very complicated year. But I'm incredibly excited by the optimism that I think we all collectively have on a way forward with all that we've sort of learned over the past year. And I'd like to thank Tim for inviting us, and I will throw it back to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Farooq. Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Mr. Cheng. And thank you, Dr. Lin, for your translation. It's been really delightful to have you. And I also want to be sure to thank the Taiwan Academy in Los Angeles and the Taiwanese Ministry of Culture for supporting this series. Join us again in May 26th for our next episode, which will be extending our reach, kind of performance in a digital age, and how can we get beyond our venues and get beyond work that is a facsimile of live performance, but to something that is inherently digital. So join us for that on May 26th, and thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.